For those that are able CCTV enabled, you can catch some of the images on 144,500. Okay, it's just gone 7 o'clock, so I think we are ready to go. I'm just going to start the introduction, Matthew, and we can kick off. Good evening, everybody, to the Power Hour Tech Talk with Brandon ZS6LZ, and you will see the slide at the moment. We are relaying some of the audio onto 145,700 repeater and SSTV images onto 144,500. I'd like to thank Brendan for his time and in preparation for this talk tonight. And it promises to be an awesome talk with a lot of imagery and a lot of tips in terms of SOTA. For those that haven't been to Brandon's QRZ page, Brandon considers himself to be a newbie because he wrote the exam in October 2022. He lives in Bryanston and his day job is investment management. I think that might take a second to SOTA. He got acquainted with radar and radio in 1989 in the South African Air Force with operating surface-to-air missiles. And that's quite interesting. Then he took up flying as a hobby, and I think that's also got a radio component. And there is a picture of Brandon with and his two youngsters, as well as a lot of images of all those peaks he's conquered. So at this point, I don't want to delay it any further. I'd like to hand over to Brandon. Thank you very much, Brandon.
Thank you very much, Keith, and thanks for the invitation. It's a great privilege, but it's with enormous trepidation because there's no disputing the new bit. So I think this is probably the most underqualified person you've ever had on a tech talk. And as an aside, we never can't come on. Yeah. So what I try to do, chatting to Keith, I mean, I don't feel like I'm qualified to really get onto debates on various topics that there are many people here who know a great deal more than I do. So certainly the intention here is a little bit to share my experience of the last 6 months. I did my last activation this previous weekend, which was just a few days over 6 months after my first activation back in December last year. So much of this has to do with my journey more than a technical lecture. I'm going to start off the picture, and this is our SA SOTA badge, and just emphasize that mountain is not all about logical things. And this is a quote, Anatoly Balkrieff, which I absolutely love. Mountains are not stadiums where I satisfy my ambition to achieve. They are cathedrals where I practice my religion. And the other one, and this is Keith. It's not the mountain we conquer, but it's ourselves. And that was Sir Edmund Hillary. Right, the agenda for today, and well, before I go into the agenda, actually, let's just talk about the game of SOTA, because this is kind of how I framed it. There's some fairly dry ways in which you can look at SOTA, but activating a remote peak, it evokes many metaphors, and some of them for me are metaphors that involve dragons and peaks and adventures. It's a game that is insanely mission oriented, and there's only one sort of victory condition, but we actually experience that victory condition differently. And it's got all the elements. It's filled with obstacles and challenges and perils, and but you've also got these powerful allies and very useful resources if you look hard enough. So it's a team game. So you have people that got different roles, but you're all working towards, I guess, a common objective. And I've played many games before, and you mentioned some of them: climbed mountains, flown aeroplanes, boats, and I can say with a very high degree of conviction that none of them are anywhere near as addictive as SOTA. All right, so the agenda that I've kind of put together, and I hope this sort of meets people's sort of interests and requirements, is really a little bit of I know Sid and Adele covered this last year in quite a bit of detail, but just a quick flyby of the game of SOTA and the rules. I'll talk about my equipment. I'm not going to talk about all the equipment and the right equipment, just the equipment I happen to have. This really does belong further down the list as far as detail goes, but I was sort of reliably informed that I couldn't speak to the kind of audience I've got right now and leave equipment to the end. I'd leave everyone very dissatisfied. So I've shuffled it up and put it at the top of the pile there. And then as quick as I can, sort of a lightning tour of my 6-month SOTA journey and just stopping with a couple of anecdotes, things I learned, things that went well, didn't go well. And then I'll try and do a bit of a sort of a step through the SOTA activation practice. And again, this is my experience. I mean, you've got Sid and Adele and other people in this room that have done dozens of peaks for every single one that I've done. And they may give you a slightly different version, or they may add something or subtract something. So this is my sort of personal experience about how I go about it. And with most things, I like to start high and broad and actually quite philosophical. So top altitude and then narrow it down until you actually get to the nitty-gritty of execution. And then just a little chat at the end about awards and recognition, and then a sneak preview into some of my SOTA plans. And then you can judge after the fact whether they went according to plan or went awry. And then just some concluding remarks. And then very happy to take questions. I'll say happy, terrified to take questions, but you know, I'll do my best. All right, so what is SOTA? And I've got comma ostensibly. All right, so what is it meant to be about? Now, if I go look at the SOTA website, it says that SOTA is an award scheme for radio amateurs that encourages portable operation in mountainous areas. That's a what statement. That's what SOTA is about. And then I go and look at Wikipedia, and there's a little bit more, and there's an element of that purpose and how. So we start seeing words like aim and encourage, and it gives us detail about temporarily from mountain peaks. And it tells us the mode of transport that you can hike, you can climb, you can cycle, etc., from the summits of mountains and all of those good things. Then there's a third source I found, which goes a little bit more into it. It's an award scheme again, but radio amateurs who love the great outdoors. Now, this is starting to feel a bit more like it because mountains are an emotive thing. And this reliable source is ChatGPT, who, funny enough, in this case, I think did a better job than both the SOTA website and Wikipedia. Right, but I think they're all pretty lame, to be honest. I mean, don't quote me. I'll get kicked off SOTA, whatever, if I say anything was lame, but I don't think that those really describe it. SOTA is actually a passion. It's about adventure and pursuit. There was nothing in those previous quotes that mentioned anything about chasing, which is 50% of SOTA. It's a dedicated activity. There's so much conversation these days about what you identify as binary and non-binary. And I'm sticking up my hand to identify as non-binary. I find chasing just as enthralling as activating. I've ducked from the office for 15 minutes at times and ended meetings early so I could get to my shack and just make a quick contact with someone who was activating on a midday on a Friday. All right, so, and it's a game that all amateurs can play. So it's a complete misconception that SOTA is for just adventurous people who are fit and healthy and want to climb mountains. SOTA is absolutely for everyone. So how does the game of SOTA work? Right, so you've got players and we've got these activators. These are guys who head off up to the mountains. They got to set up their stations, and their mission is very simple: make successful radio contacts from the summit. So that is player number one. The other player is the chasers, and these guys could be at their QTH, they could be on other summits. In fact, they could be anywhere in the world. And their mission is to locate and make successful contacts with as many activators as they can. Right, the playing field is enormous. It's the entire planet. So you've got thousands and thousands of qualified mountains scattered across all the continents. Every single summit is assigned a score between 1 and 10 based on its elevation. It's got to qualify in terms of certain rules that relate to prominence and slightly more subjectively difficulty in reaching the summit. And I guess that's where some problems come in. All right, South Africa, we have 10 SOTA regions. They correspond with our provincial political boundaries, the only difference being the Eastern Cape, which is then separated into the highlands and the lowlands. So that gives us a nice round number of 10 SOTA regions. All right, how it's scored. If you're earning points on activator, very simple. You earn points by reaching a summit and making a minimum of 4 successful contacts. So you only have to make, Sid, you can correct me whenever I go off piste here, but one contact is an activation, but to actually score for the activation, you need at least 4. So your chaser on the other side is just the absolute mirror image of that. And you earn points by making contact with activators, and you get exactly the same number of points. So if it's a 8 pointer or 6 points or 1 point or 10 pointer, you will log those points as a chaser. And some peaks are bonus points, and this just recognizes that there are certain times of the year where things are really difficult. And you can imagine in Europe and North America and Asia, those winter months are particularly challenging. But in South Africa, we've got parts of the Eastern Cape and Drakensberg as well, where you can get additional points for winter activations. Right, so my SOTA journey that I'll take you through is 24 attempts and 3 successful ones. I think we'll probably focus more on the one that failed because it's probably more interesting. But it's a journey that started on the 16th of December last year, and the last one was literally this previous Saturday or Sunday. I can't remember which. But yeah, I'll try to keep it flowing. But there are a lot of pictures, as Keith warned. All right. So starting off with equipment, and I'm not going to dwell on it. And again, it's not a debate over what works and what doesn't. It's what I've got. And again, because I said I identify as a bit non-binary, as much of a chaser, there's absolutely my QTH setup there. Because I'm a new ham, I guess I bought new radios. So Yaesu FTDX10, love it. The amp on the right is quite a new addition, so I've only been using it for a couple of weeks. It worked out fine, 100 watts. But the SOTA radios really are the bottom left and bottom right. So I've got 2 SOTA rigs. One is which I sort of consider my super portable rig. I can use that for climbing, hiking, bicycling. I can cycle with it. And then on the right-hand side, I've got my heavier rig, 100 watts, and I'll go into the rest of the detail. And I'll use that. I do hike with it, but you know, anything that involves a vehicle, I'll take the extra. So bottom left, Elecraft KX2, it's lacquer, it's 350 grams, which is my new 12 watts. It's got an unbelievable internal tuning system. So yeah, the proverbial, what's it, wet spaghetti, what do you call it, wet noodle. You know, so it'll tune it. It's got great filters. The audio is amazing, but again, it doesn't have a band scope, so it's not the kind of thing you'll take to the river and put your feet up and what have you. But it's an awesome little radio. On the right is the Yaesu FT710. That's the baby brother of my DX10. It really is quite similar in its operation. So for stupid people like me that are not that good at sort of switching modes, it's quite easy to use something that's familiar. The one on the left I actually use with everything is lightweight, so it goes the lightweight pack. It goes with a 6-meter lightweight pole, which I'll show you, etc. The one on the right, okay, I pack it when I'm carrying it in a backpack. It's a more robust backpack, and then I normally do that with a 10-meter pole. Top left, many of you will know that is the little G90. It's got a huge fan club for a lot of reasons, 20 watts. But it really gets out there. Like the Elecraft, it'll tune just about anything. It's a little bit heavier than the Elecraft, so it weighs about 1.5 kilos. But that little tiny band scope can make all the difference in the world when you go away for a weekend. So if you're on one radio for a weekend and you're going to throw SOTA into the mix, that's absolutely the radio that I'd be taking with me. All right, from the antenna point of view, I'm just going to tell you what I use, not debate the merits of this system versus other perfectly workable solutions. Sort of my weapon of choice here, and on advice I received and trying 1 or 2 other things, is the link dipole. I like it. It's simple. It doesn't need a matching unit. It doesn't need transformers. Band changes are easy. It's efficient. Doesn't require ground system. Doesn't require counterpoise. And I've purposely designed this for in terms of the links and band frequencies for SOTA. 40 meters is where most of your contacts are made in SA. Use 20 meters to reach out to the Western Cape or Eastern Cape to Namibia. Don't do a lot of DX on 20. And for me, 10 meters has proven to be the band for DX. And yeah, you've got some great little sort of applications there that are free online that you plug in your height and all sorts of other parameters, and it'll guide you in building that. And you can see here, I'm just showing the my sort of antenna analyzer, and I will specifically cut those wires and tune them for the QRP centers of activity. Well, it's not exactly here, it's pretty close there on the 40-meter band, 20-meter band. On 10, that's not the QRP center, but 28300 is quite frequently used in that SOTA environment. But you can see getting that impedance level of 50 and SWR where you want it, you can really nail where you're going to be operating. Battery, I use the little one on the left, these Bionos. They're lithium iron phosphate batteries. The one on the right I use for the 100-watt rig, and what does that say? 144 watt hours. I think the one on the left is 54. I haven't got to the bottom of any of these batteries yet. I still don't know when they actually run out. They work amazingly well, and they're not particularly heavy. Incidentally, you can't see it. I've got Anderson power poles on the end of everything. So all my radios, both in the shack, my SOTA radios, plus obviously the batteries, they're all on Anderson power poles, so I can just switch them in and out without any drama. The poles, as I said, the little one on the right, that's my sort of ultra lightweight cycle high climb. It comes from SOTA beams, tactical mini, 800 grams, 6 meters. 6 meters actually does the job, but if you can do it, 10 meters on the left spider beam, it's great, but now you're going from 800 grams to 2.5 kilograms. The one on the right packs tightly and nicely into your backpack. The other one, not so much, which is why it is broken in 2 places at the moment. And that's a story for later. All right. Okay. So the tour, right? This is a map of South Africa. Going to be a bit of a whirlwind tour, mostly using photographs. And where the first one started is right up in the top there in Mpumalanga, not far from Lydenburg in the Mount Anderson area. The peak, which was the first activation, was a thing called Kliprot's, a 10-pointer. And yeah, I mean, what was the positive? My first SOTA, which was one of only 4 that I haven't done solo, with a friend of mine's daughter who's definitely got to be a ZU one day. She was massively, massively enthused, even though my activation was poor. Great little walk up from the valley, probably about a 500-meter vertical ascent. Yeah, I battled to make contacts. I just got 5, so barely made my 4 contacts. That inverted well L that I put up, I mean, apart from 2 poles and all the complexity, which is unnecessary, it didn't work particularly well. I think I had good counterpoise, but what I was probably missing was RF. But anyway, I didn't even bother to fix it. I mean, once I switched to linked dipole, I had a much simpler solution that worked well pretty much every time. So I abandoned that inverted L. So my insights from this one, I'm going to share insights when they come up, is that most mountains in South Africa, even very steep-sided mountains that are surrounded by cliffs, most of them are flat-ish on top or rounded, and most of them have few or no trees. And the man-made objects that are there, like towers, are things that you actually want to stay away from. So my first thing is, taking a pole with guy lines, and you don't have to take guy lines, but now you become a bit of a slave to what you can connect your pole to, and that takes away options. And optionality is really, really important, because the choices of where you put your antenna and rig it on the slope can be quite important. So if I had to almost take one thing from that, I'd say, find the ground that suits your preferred antenna. Don't find a compromise antenna to suit any ground. All right. It's not anyway. And also I discovered the value of taking a drone up with me, which I've done now on all activations. All right. So these arrows that connect the places, I didn't go there directly. I probably went home and did a whole bunch of other things. But the next spot was KM243, which is better known as a Spionkop, and also better known as a very, very significant battlefield. Reason for being there, and I'm saying this because, again, most of these activations happen because I was en route to doing something else. They don't have to be a dedicated trip. You can build SOTA into the rest of your life. We were off on holiday to Belito, and for various reasons, we had to take 2 vehicles, which meant I had a bit of flexibility. So this is a sacred ground for me. I've walked this mountain many, many times. I've walked up from the north and followed the route to the Carolina Commandos, which Denise Rates writes about it. Now, being alone on mountains is quite spiritual, and some of these significant battlefields, when you're up there alone, eventually some people did come up. I mean, it's quite a sensation. I also activated as a HOTA site, so there are a number of sites, HOTA Heritage on the Air. You would do double activations, and just absolutely love this place. I've cycled up and down there as part of mountain bike races and things. And it just shows how many different ways your soul can use the same mountain. My other positive, and I saw that Christy joined there. This was actually my first contact with Christy, ZS4CGR, and his wife, Mari. And the significance is the only time Christy hasn't been with me around the mountain was that first activation, and her fault was with me. And he's been with me on every single activation since then, which makes my wife a lot happier knowing that there's someone watching me. Challenges on this one, I use TripAdvisor to get the access time for the gate. I thought it was 8, it actually was 9, and then the guard sauntered up there after 10 o'clock. So sometimes you just got to plan for things not going exactly as you expect. All right, then we went to Belito and we came back. And again, I had a little bit of leeway because we had a second vehicle. And the next target was a place just above the town of Wakkerstrom, which is an absolutely beautiful town on that KZN Mpumalanga border. And again, reason for being there, I just happened to be going that way. So positives from this trip, I saw 200 southern bald ibises. The farm I was staying on, I've only ever seen the birds once, and certainly not 200 of them. So I heard the track up there was dreadful in terms of the feedback got, so I thought that the better opportunity was to cycle up, and I think it turned out to be quite a good decision. Yeah, challenges. I didn't realize lack of planning. I didn't realize that the HOTA site, which I wanted to activate, was actually a couple of Ks away from the SOTA site. So I had to do 2 deployments. And I think the key insight is don't find yourself surprised by factors you could have known at the planning stage. And the cows are also quite good company up there. All right, next day, which was the 10th of January. Okay, also a very significant one for me. This is also my birthday, by the way. So very understanding family, but it did mean that I had a deadline to get home for a family dinner. I've been reading about Majuba since I was a boy, and I'd only ever seen it from the base. So I did this as a HOTA site too, and because it was a first activation, got to write the little historical narrative and share that. So absolutely love those things. One of the insights, negatives, it's much easier to get lost at the bottom of a mountain than when you're on the mountain. And sometimes listening to what someone tells you, and they say, walk past this gate, past that drum, you'll see a fence on your left, a gate on the right, one tree, go through there. Listen very, very carefully, because you just go and start 100 meters to the wrong side of that, and before you know it, you are bundu bashing and going through wattles. Anyway, so I stuffed around for about 30 minutes, so it took 20 minutes to get to the top from there. So I wasn't running behind, but you can make life a lot simpler. Right, then from where were we? Okay, from there, the next activation. So my son Michael started Stellenbosch this year, and we needed to get his gear down. So again, I didn't go and make it a dedicated SOTA trip. I was road tripping, and we decided to go and activate something en route. So close to Bloemfontein is Tabanshu, which is actually a magical mountain. And it's known mostly for its casino and what have you, but it's nice to off the beaten track. And what I found on the summit is completely unexpected. You can see the image of the mountain there in the middle. And it is quite a climate from where this photograph's taken. It's probably about 4K to the top, and it's about 600 meters of vertical ascent. But it's just like, there's so many of these South African mountains, when you get to the top, it's just unbelievable. So the top of Tabanshu is, you can see in the top left, it's almost like Stonehenge. You've got these massive rocks, and they sit in a semicircle. They're these pristine lakes, and you get up there, and it's almost druidic. It kind of is. It's like nature Stonehenge, and you almost wonder, what the significance was to the ancient people. But anyway, on the day here, to use teenage vernacular, that antenna was banging. We had fantastic 5.9 contacts all over the country. Big downside, very expensive downside. We lost our drone. Mike was flying incident with a bird of prey. Anyway, bird was fine, thank goodness. But we've now got some very, very strict protocols with flying and birds for their safety as well as the equipment. Yeah, and I think the one sort of learning that I wrote down for this one, think intelligently about the activation zone. I'm sure other activators will agree, is that going and picking the trig beacon is sometimes the very, very worst place to do it, particularly if you've got a dipole, because you can get funny angles with the legs if it kind of sticks up. Rock as ground is not necessarily always great. Situating your antenna on the edge of a cliff, it might sound like a wonderful idea because you're high up, but it just feels like that's not the great context. So I'm quite careful. Your activation zone is 25 meters vertically from the summit, so it actually gives you an area. And searching around a little bit, you know where your chases are. I always look at a map beforehand and use a compass and orientate my dipole so I get the right sort of the best radiation patterns. So I just randomly put it up. I take my compass out. And then I also try and find the ground that will slope in the most advantageous way from where I am. So just a little bit of thinking about takeoff angles and things like that. And obviously having soil and wet soil under you is better than just having, a pile of rocks. So that was my one thing here, that site on Tabanshu would have been terrible if I'd chosen the beacon, but it was actually absolutely fantastic by just moving a little bit away from that. All right, from there, went all the way down to Stellenbosch, and then the next one was a fantastic one-pointer called Groot Waarboom Kop. And the climbing bit here was not compulsory. It is part of the mountain, but that it is a detour. And what this actually just tells you about SOTA is it's not about the points. You can go and do a one-pointer and have an amazing, amazing time, and you can go and do an 8-pointer that you just drive off the road to get there. So, but also highlights the limitations of objective scoring in these things. And if you're going to obsess about scores, you're going to make yourself very, very unhappy. This also climbing with the amazing Brigitte there. So this is very, very bad news for misogynists and sexists out there. Go climb with Brigitte and you'll see who's got just to say who's the bravest. There's some amazing climbing on, actually that route is called Sands of Time, which is an absolute classic. this friction climbing. All right, so on my route back from Stellenbosch now, so now I'm solo in the car. I've got the bicycles, my wife is flying, I'm on my own, and I headed off towards Graaff-Reinet and managed while I was driving to find a little farm to stay at. And first stop was Valley of Desolation. This was quite impulsive. I wasn't planning on doing an activation, but I was running a little bit ahead of time. Positives, Valley of Desolation. Its SA is one of the most stunning places. If you're in Graaff-Reinet, you have to go there. From an activation point of view, it's a relatively easy, quick walk from the car park. Most people could manage that. But what also, in terms of impulsive, you realize, how strong your network is. And good planning doesn't necessarily mean, days of planning. And in this case, it was like thanks to Vaughan ZS2 Victor Romeo, who literally gave me my full briefing about this peak on my cell phone before I got there, and all went according to plan. But what a stunning place. The next morning, I headed across the road. So that is Kamdoobu National Park, kind of to the north. And then I think it's kind of to the south, if I'm not mistaken. So EC627. And this is Hunglip. Geez, and this is absolutely amazing. So Kamdoobu National Park is wow. It's just wow, wow, wow. Okay. Now, the amazing thing here is there's no entrance to this area of the park. You actually have to go to the other bit and you get a key, like one key. So if you imagine this, you're the only vehicle in thousands and thousands of hectares of rugged wilderness. And when you finish, you go and give the key back. And on the day that I was there were actually 2 vehicles, which was extraordinary. And we had to do complex negotiations of how the key admin was going to work. Some of the stuff involves some serious off-road driving. So it's only suitable for proper vehicles. And yeah, amazing wildlife. And then the last little walk up to the top, you get escorted by a troop of baboons. And the best thing is just ignore them. Baboons are often your escorts in these things. Yeah, so negatives, my wife wasn't happy with the scratches on the car. And insights here, I think for many peaks, your off-road driving skills are probably just as important as your mountain skills and your hiking skills. And a little note to self, carry a saw, panga, or clippers. Some of these tracks are overgrown and you can avoid like scratching your vehicle if you've got the implements. And then the other major insight that came from this one is remoteness is not a function of how far you are in a straight line from the nearest town, but it's whether you've got comms, and in this case you don't have comms until you get to the top, and then you have, and how long it would take for anyone to get there. Now, yeah, if you go and break a leg or you have a vehicle problem, it's not the end of the world. Someone will eventually come and fetch you. But I do think that there are things like snakes and whatever where you don't want to be there for 7 hours before someone finds out. So I do carry now a little satellite device I can message on for places like this. Okay, then I obviously went home, and then what did I do next? Okay, this was just boredom. Suikerbosrand, yeah, so what's lack about this? Nearby for Joburgers, easily accessible. If you don't want to walk far, you can stop your car and literally walk 50 meters. The surprise was I bumped into Kobus ZS6KBS, who had many QSOs. In fact, talking about the military, our surface air missiles, he was artillery, so there's some ballistics chat. And yeah, I chose to walk the last few Ks up, but I took the ride down with Kobus at cold beer. Is hard to argue with. My only negative is I was actually sorry to be there for a short time, make a day trip out of it. Suikerbosrand is a gem, find the time. I have no insights here, so I think my ignorance went unmolested on this occasion. Yeah, okay, from there, I was back to Dahlstrom, on the route to Dahlstrom, and first activation of a very interesting mountain called Knapdar, which is sort of somewhere between Dahlstrom and Leidenburg. And this is every single one of these peaks is magical. And Sid, I mean, you said to me a long time ago, every single peak is a challenge. There are no easy peaks. There's always something about it that's a challenge. And this one, yeah, there was some interesting driving bits. It was awesome. I had my 83-year-old father with me. But the top there, the experience is totally zen. I've got this met Jacob. Look, it took me 2 weeks to get permission here. I had to explain how SOTA works, and it was complicated. But I met Jacob in the right place. He was tending his cattle, drove up with me. And all these intricate stone structures, there's accommodation at the top. It's quite intriguing. If the name, by the way, here is Ton Glen, if you want to look it up, Tonglen. And you only get up there if they come and fetch you in their 4x4. But yeah, it's the kind of thing I'd expect to see in Ireland or Scotland in the mist, and find sort of people dancing around some pagan sort of Stonehenge thing. So stunning views, all good. It was a lovely trip. full of rain and all sorts of things. We only just made the activation. This was my first big outing, right? Okay, so this was going to KN052 in the Drakensberg. It doesn't have a name on SOTA. This was in March. Most of the route there will actually be quite well known to many of you, because the first bit is just the hike up to the top of the together. The chain ladder will be well known. I started driving at 5 o'clock. That road is now terrible. Started walking at 6. This required the most planning, and I'm going to use the example later, particularly with regards to safety protocols and solo walking. You know, well-trodden path up to the together, and then it's pretty isolated beyond that. And yeah, it was great. The antenna system's working well, radio's working well. Yeah, physically, it's about 1,000 meters of vertical ascent, 22 kilometers round trip. But still managed to be on air by, I think, 9 a.m. And I was back in the car park with a cold beer at about 2. So things went even slightly better than expected. Here are some pictures from the top. I'll try and talk quickly here. I mean, in the top left, in the distance, there are a lot of things that are quite significant. Far on the left there, you can see Catkin Peak. To the right, that's Monk's Cow. And just to the right of that is Champagne Castle, which is KZN's highest peak. So that's on the agenda. In the middle ground, you've got Cathedral Peak, Bell, In and Out of Horn, Mitre. I have a great ambition to try and do all of those together. They're climbing peaks sometime during the course of next year. In the foreground there, you've got one of the Mweni pinnacles. So out of picture to the right would be a mountain called Mpondron that I climbed in 2001, and I'm absolutely totally amped to go and do that as a SOTA activation. Top right there, Sentinel. The provincial boundary cuts right next to that, so that's the highest peak in the Free State province. So I'm checking in with Sid whether he knows how to hold the other end of a rope, because I fully intend to drag him up there. And yeah, you can see for this kind of thing, weapon of choice is that KX2 there at the bottom. So Insight is done correctly. Solo mountain walking can actually be less risky than walking in group. The statisticians, you know, we understand additive probabilities, and you can make these things safe. I'm also got really, really sick from drinking Summit water, which is done because I had a water filtration system with me. I was just lazy and in a hurry. Just because the water is clean further down in the streams doesn't mean the water is clean on top, and I knew that beforehand, so that was just done. All right, so that was great. And then on the way home from this, the main sort of feature was KN052, and that's what I went down for. And then I threw in as a side that Table Mountain next to Harry Smith, FS024, which was actually an awesome adventure. You'll know which one I'm talking about. You go past Harry Smith, there's a big Table Mountain on the left, Platberg, or it's in Tabazwe. This thing is mostly an exercise of really, really hard driving. The final pass is steep, but it's concreted, so that's not a problem. But the whole access road to the bottom there is totally washed away. So that is, you know, not only 4x4, but ideally sort of high clearance as well. And what was super cool about this, I think this was the first time I used the Yaesu on an activation. So it's the first time I used 100 watts. It was a great DX experience. I got 4 separate QSOs into Australia. Unfortunately, one of them wasn't Sid and Adele, who were trying. Solid 5959, contacted to Kangaroo Island there. Yeah, challenges, further unhappiness from wife, I guess, on scratches to the vehicle. So insight would be learned from previous insights. And then I would also say that another insight would be, like, don't fall into the bullshit trap of other people's idea of what SOTA is all about. There's no actual ethic or rule about QRP and whatever. If you've got 100 watts and you want to use it, go for it. It's just as much fun. It gives you a different experience. And there's also no ethic about SOTA Pete's having to be a physical activity. You know, I mean, I love the physical stuff, but it's a different experience and just as much fun when you're 40 meters away from your vehicle. So don't need anyone else to find that experience for you. All right, so after that, where did I go? Oh yes, back to Mpumalanga. And this was an unfortunate one because it was the first one I took my wife on. It was the most uninspiring activation yet. Basically pulled off the road, set up an antenna. I had to apologize on all my contacts to the people on the other side with the traffic noise. But it does tell you that you know, SOTA peaks are not only for mountaineers, and there are also some extremely scenic peaks that are easily accessible. People with disabilities, or actually even people just despise the thought of exercise, you can still activate. Yeah, so I had to make up some ground with my wife there. She wasn't overly enamored with her first experience of SOTA. But fortunately, the next peak was like an hour away. So we just did a short drive. And the next one was Falkop. It was an 8-pointer. And yeah, thank goodness for that. So I got to rectify the damage done. I did get the question where the path was, and the honest answer is quite often there is no path. You just take the Tiger line to the trig beacon. And yeah, the massive value of the SOTA network, and this one was thanks to Rudy ZS6 Romeo Bravo for the contacts, LAN owner, helping facilitate. And yeah, positives, absolutely stunning drive. I mean, I'm in this area so frequently, and there's no reason I would have taken that road otherwise. So stunning drive. And yeah, maybe one insight, if you're going to go with a non-SOTA crew, kind of set expectations about how long it takes and how long you're going to be on air before they start twiddling their thumbs. All right, now this was the biggest sort of expedition I've done yet. I've got to be in my bonnet and set myself a challenge. And I wanted to see if I could do 7 10-pointers in a weekend. Sorry, when I say weekend, long weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I picked the Golden Gate area and Harrismith area, and I kind of strung a whole bunch of candidates together so you can see the little things there in green. And I gave them a number, which was the expected sequence that I wanted to do them in. As it happened, the weather didn't really play along, and when all was done, I managed to activate 5 10-pointers, but I did them in 2 days. And in not one of those 5 peaks did I encounter a single human being on any of them. So ultimately what actually happened was insomnia dictated the order of events, which was fortuitous to the weather. So day of departure, I was awake at 2 a.m., couldn't get back to sleep. At 3 o'clock, I decided I just gave up, and I was on the road at 4 a.m. And while I was driving, I sort of in my head reconfigured the order, and I thought, well, maybe I can go for 3 today. Yeah, band conditions were atrocious, but fortunately the chases were absolutely amazing. And by sundown on that day, I had my 3 10-pointers in the bag, had a beer in hand, and 2 of those were first activations. So all in all, it was a very, very satisfying day. And this was the route I took. Sorry, and the last 2 would be the activations I did on the subsequent day. And I missed 2, which I'm going to have to go back for. And this is kind of what it looked like. This is the one that Sid said he's going to do this weekend, Woodhouse Corp. Unfortunately, I had to check into accommodation first, and yes, it's sort of agonizingly slow. And I think the highlights, it's a happy place. You know, there's a good mix of SOTA, a challenging 4x4 drive, which is good. Then you've got a good walk up. Then you've got something unexpected, like you encounter a black wildebeest that is really, really getting quite cheeky. So you need innovative solutions. And in this case, it was basically pulling out my antenna pole and extending it, and they all ran off. So yeah, band conditions were tough, and we really, really need on days like this those dedicated chases, particularly because those activation windows are tiny. My records here tell me I started activating at 9 a.m. and all contacts were done by 9:20, and you know, heading off that mountain. So key insights: when you work in a tight schedule, you need to work really, really closely with your chasers as a team. You need to consider yourself a team, and if it means over communicating, you should, in terms of your progress, in terms of your ETA. So if you're running ahead or behind, you need to tell people, because you can't expect everyone to be lounging around in their shacks waiting for you, especially on a Friday, and if you're only going to be activating for 20 minutes. All right, then it was hopping in the car. Next peak was Arventress. This was the first activation. Took me weeks of planning to get access here, working through the farmers and the managers, and actually eventually it was a big relief to be walking. I wasn't really that confident at the stage that I was going to fit 3 in. You know, we were only 6 weeks away from the summer solstice, and the farmer told me it's going to take an hour if I walk hard to the top. But I flicked the nitro switch, and I actually got up in under 30 minutes. So I managed in time. Bands were terrible. First contact 12:31, and was done 20 minutes later. So kind of things were back on track. So my insight on this, it wasn't that anything went wrong, but it's just like sharing, just to make sure you don't obsess with the mountain navigation. It's so easy just to focus on the mountain and how you get up there, but a lot of it's getting to the mountain. So if I was relying on the internet connection purely to get the out of being stuff, because you don't have any. So make sure your maps are downloaded, that you've got paper and what have you, know how far it is from the turnoff to the next turnoff, and just don't waste time. You can end up wasting a lot of time. I'm going to go through things quite quickly now. Next one, I got to, this was first activation of Sidesburg. This was the 3rd mountain on the day. Got to the Basutu Cultural Village. That bottom right is the picture I was looking at. I thought, well, like I probably got enough time, which was fine. I probably didn't take the best route up, but I still got up sort of more or less a little bit ahead of schedule. But it's quite a good one where your planning can be meticulous and you can use all the resource in place, but you still get a few surprises. First activation was 3:44 in the afternoon, and the final one was at 4:12. All good. I just want to show you where things go wrong. Here's a topographical map. I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but it looks pretty simple. You know, here's a traverse. Okay, the first thing you actually have to go down before you go up. And if you look at these contours, they look steep, but they look fairly gentle. You go onto the photograph, and all of a sudden now you can see, hold on, it's not that gentle. There's actually a very, very sheer cliff face there, and there's a possibility there's a cliff band all the way around. But if you look carefully, it looks like there's some continuity between the grass there and the grass on the summit, and then you make a mental note, there's going to be a tree on the left, and there's going to be a feature on the right, and directly opposite. And then you get there, and it turns out that there's not grass at all. There's still about a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 meter rock wall. And this is where it's important not to get like your pride ahead of you. You know that you've got chasers, have given you thumbs up, you've given them an ETA, and they can very, very quickly put pressure on you to make that activation. So I had to actually do a little bit of a stop, breathe, think for a minute. I looked at it. It didn't look like a complicated climb. It wasn't a complicated climb. It wasn't dangerous. But it is an example of weather is the other one. You know, people hanging around too long when there's lightning and stuff like that, because there might be pressure to have those activations. All right, just one little mental note for things like where you've got a scramble section like that. Make sure you've got to make a note of the features at the top of a climb or scramble section, and make sure that you can navigate back to that point, because you can easily see the way up from the bottom. But sometimes when you're on the top, it's very, very hard to look back and see where it is. Now, you can imagine being on a cliff that is surrounded by rock bands, and there's only one place that's reasonable to get up. Now you can't find it. Now, overnight, temperatures are going to go below zero, and things can get serious quite quickly. So either mark it on GPS, but mostly make a note of the features. Right, so the chasing, that was a very dedicated day. There were actually 4 people that managed to get all of them, and another 4 that managed to get 2. So it was all kudos to the chasers. Right, I'm going to very, very quickly, I'm not even going to talk to the final ones. This is just to our wives, just to sort of say we really, really battle without you, but we just get by. You know, we don't really have complicated meals, but they're not the end of the world. All right, so next day was Mount Paul. Yeah, a bit of a drive up. You can see the angle of the car, a little bit of a scramble up, and yeah, nice activation, nice pictures. This was the one that I wasn't able to do the next day, and funny enough, I spent more time trying to negotiate access to this mountain than anything else. Baker's Corp. I had to speak to someone who ran a little lodge, and they've got a lion sanctuary, and then I had to speak to a father who's an amazing guy with amazing stories. And just when I had everything sorted out, he actually suggested that I access it from the other side and not his property. And I started all again with the farm owner and the manager. And eventually, when I got there for the second activation of the day, the top right is the picture. I phoned the place I was meant to be staying. I canceled my accommodation, got a credit for the next time. And just as I was driving up, I saw that the sky was clearer in the north and darker in the south. I phoned her back and I said, what are the chances of reinstating? And anyway, I managed to squeeze in another activation that afternoon. So that's Glen Paul, 10-pointer, absolutely stunning. If you're a climber, that's Eagle's Head Nest, I can't remember what they call it, but it's a very famous climbing spot, but managed to squeeze that in the afternoon. Yeah, some of the stuff is steep, and I was thinking about, I was climbing over a fence. I was like, geez, like, well done, Adele. You know, like, you must be a better sort of scrambler than I am, because I was sitting there scratching my head how to get over these things. And apparently she got over it without any difficulty at all. All right, this was I thought, well, look, what I can do for the Sunday, at least I'll get 6 out of the 7, is go for Mooihoek Kop, which is also 10-pointer. It's a massive beast of a mountain. It doesn't actually look that obvious from here. I woke up in the morning and it was electricals and thunder and lightning and rain and what have you. So at that point, I had to, pack it all up. But I was very, very happy with 5 10-pointers in 2 days. Right, next adventure was just this quite recently, Limpopo. This is the highest point in Limpopo. This is Iron Crown. I don't really have much to say about it. It was a really awesome day because I was en route to doing some business in Zanin. I was chatting to some investors down there and managed to get 2 HOTA activations, so heritage on their activation on the same day. I was talking about the sites of the last long tom that was destroyed in the Boer War. That was all good fun. So the only learning from here is just be careful about your planning, because I had my Apple Maps and Google Maps, but they terminated not at the mountain, but the turn off to the mountain, which still then involved a couple of kilometers of Jeep track and 4x4. And given the mist, I had absolutely no idea where the summit was. So fortunately, this is obviously where you need your downloaded maps, you need your bearings and all the other nav aids, but don't just get there and find out that your nav stops there and you don't know how to go further. I think there was some DX on that day. Got great intel from Brian Jones and Sid to stay away from the tower, that there was horrible HF interference there, which there was. And yeah, I mean, sun came out, stunning day. Then this was good fun. I think Mark's on the call. So this is just like right here, GP024. This is home base. This is Cradle of Humankind. This is where I cycle every weekend. Absolutely awesome. I mean, Mark is in the bottom right there over his shoulder. Behind that, you've got some of the most important hominid sites literally in history. You've got Stagfontein Caves. Beyond that to the right, sort of, it's not public, but there's Rising Star Cave. So for paleoanthropologists, I mean, this is literally, this is where it all happens. But I mean, if you can imagine here, it was great to do the activation with Mark. He and I had a lot of contact before this. So I'd actually have counted him as a friend even before I met him. And he does have good taste in beer, which immediately makes him a kindred spirit. But can you imagine, I mean, this was like, we were sitting there, you've got lions roaring, and we're making contacts. We had DX into Finland, DX in Asia, as well as probably, I don't know, 30 odd really, really good local content. So yeah, insights, much as I enjoyed the solitude of mountains, doing it with a chum is equally cool. And you don't have to travel halfway around the country to have serious SOTA fun. You can do it on your doorstep. Okay, this one I'm going to talk too much about. This is Kral Corp 8 Pointer, just south of Heidelberg. It is quite interesting how far you don't have to go from Joburg before you can't hear traffic, see anything. You meet amazing people. The landowner, amazing woman. She walked up with me with the dogs, lacquer chat. Conditions were booming. I think we've got 8 DX. I think there's, literally Poland, France, Germany. I've got the whole thing, Canary Islands, I think, a couple of UK. My insight from this, I was getting into a comfort zone with my activations, and I was actually too used to these things when nothing was going wrong. And I was definitely cruising for bruising. And I was getting too addicted to the 100-watt rig as well, which is fantastic, but it's not actually really a dedicated SOTA weapon. So after that, it's all in red. That's where it all went wrong. It's an hour and a half driving to the highest peak in Limpopo, Arseville Krantz, NW001. Absolutely amazing place. I've never visited if it weren't for SOTA. The walk up is stunning. You can see in the top middle, there's probably a roped section of about 100 meters. When I say roped, you're not clipped in, you're just using your hands on the rope. My mistake was I took the 100-watt rig with me, which works beautifully as long as your antenna is working perfectly. But I carried the pole up, I dropped the pole, and the pole was actually strapped to my backpack, but loosely. I did what I could. So now instead of being at 10 meters, the antenna was now at probably only about 3 or 4 meters. It wouldn't tune. SWR was off the charts. I didn't have wire to extend the antenna. I trimmed to try and get 30. I used some of the extra wire to try and extend 20, ditto for 10. Without a tape measure, without an analyzer, and running out of time, I had to get home. It was basically an abandoned activation. Anyway, I can't go into all the things there, but there are a lot of lessons learned, which I shared. And mostly take the right gear, and if you're taking the other gear, make sure you've got some contingency plans. Right, and then I think this is the final one, if I'm not mistaken. This is this is also near Mpumalanga, so another trip to Dahlstrom. It looks like a pretty basic drive up. Some people could say it's boring. It's not boring. It's a lacquer drive there, the dirt road from the Dahlstrom side to get you, 20, 25 Ks of sort of country roads and a bit of 4x4. Animals, all sorts of antelopes or jackals or n number of raptors. Absolutely beautiful. And also, again, just the solitude of being up there on your own. And again, our SOTA community, this was Martinus at this stage, who made the contacts, had already spoken to the person, organized access. And just what a privilege. Did have a few little glitches in the beginning with the antenna, which I need to try and figure out. Maybe it's just time to go and replace all the coax and connectors and just start from scratch, because after that, conditions booming, no problems at all. Right, so I think that was the whole journey of the things that I've been doing for the last 6 months. This is a little bit of analysis of the bands and modes. You've got to ignore that red blob which shows 0 megahertz. That's was an issue with the downloaded CSV file that I've rectified, but it somehow hasn't pulled through in the stats. But you can get a sense of what the breakdown is. Those are QSOs per month just this year. And you can see the vast majority made on 40 meters. The yellow is 20 meters, but that is predominantly local, just reaching out to the guys on the West Coast and beyond, or Namibia. And then the 28 megahertz stuff is all DX. And then for me, it's all SSB at the moment. There could be some other modes in the future. I've just got a lot on my plate at the moment, and that'll have to wait. So 100% SSB, and that gives you a bit of a breakdown of the bands. My top chasers, just analyzing what's happened in 6 months. Right at the top there's Christy and Mari just below me, who's missed 1 or 2. And I don't underestimate what an important part of my safety system the chasers are. There are a lot of remote things coming. There's a lot of bird trips I'm going to be doing on my own. A couple of them are going to be overnights, like even 2 nights overnight. And knowing that there are people up there and they tune into the radio most of the time is a big part of the safety system. So without going into it there's Marioki, and of course there's Vaughan and Sid down there, and Quibus and Mark and Sid and Tani and Adele and Woody and Philip, etc., etc. But these are all people, when their names, when those call signs come up, they've become familiar names, and it's wonderful to hear their voices. Right, so SOTA activation practice. I'm going to do this as quickly as I can. Start with asking why you want to do the activation. What is the purpose? What do you want to achieve personally? How's it going to make you feel afterwards? These are important questions. You don't just dive into the equipment and stuff. Because from the high altitude stuff, you can start building a mission. And now you're getting down to slightly lower altitude. What type of activation do I want to do? Is it going to be near or far? Is it going to be local or involve travel? Is it going to be 1 day or many days? Am I going to be doing it on my own, or am I going to take my friends and family? And what are their needs going to be? What's going to make it a worthwhile outing for them? What abilities and skills does that require? And do I have those abilities and skills, and can I do it safely? What equipment will I need? Do I have that equipment, and will I need to acquire it to do it safely? So then you identify the target, and you start big. And I've used an example here of Bloemfontein, and this was when Michael and I were heading down to Stellenbosch. And you know that you're going to roughly be near Bloem, but you look around and you see, okay, here's a nice little patch. I can see some reds, and the reds are, you can see that the yellows are 8s, and then the greens are 6s, and this is on SOTA maps, and the 10s. I see a whole bunch in there. Zoom in a little bit closer. All right, I've got 5. And the left-hand side is Tabanchu. But if I go and start looking at them individually, I can use maps, I can use Google Earth. Some of them may be very, very difficult. They might involve technical climbing and ropes, and you may not be able to do that or have someone to do it with. So you find something that works. And again, so here's Tabanchu. So, okay, look, that looks all right. The access we found out is from the north. Nothing looks too serious in terms of steep, but it's still going to be 600 meters. And make sure you're going to take someone with you who's capable of doing 600 meters vertically, because it's still quite a challenge. And then, of course, you go and look at a photograph and you say, well, hold on, if you look here, those little smooth slopes, it looks kind of continuous, but you look at the photograph and you say, well, it's not continuous at all. It's multi-rock bands. So then you go and phone a friend, get local intel. You can normally use Google Maps. You can use a whole bunch of things, and it will undoubtedly pop a guest house. This one's really good. Trails. All right, it involves mountain biking, running. These guys are outdoors people, good people to chat to. And as it happens, they've got rooms on their farm, 250 Rand a night, quaint, beautiful, clean, lacquer. And then you get the information. They tell you where they think you should be going. Then what I normally do is I listen to them, and I go back to the map, and I draw on the map what I think they've told me. And then I take this picture and I send it back to them, and I say, is this what you meant? Are we on the same page? Are we seeing it the same? All right, gaining access and permissions. Okay, this is like to Sherlock Holmes. It can take a lot of time. Use whatever resources you can, but make sure you get it, because if you don't get it, the next time we're not going to be allowed to go and activate it. So I think it's actually almost like a religious rule of SOTA is get land permission. Planning and safety, I'm going to use KN52 as an example. This was the KZN Drakensberg one. I've marked waypoints there. The waypoint is where I start. It's first one at the top. Next one is top of the ladders. Third one is the peak. And then I've got a reference waypoint, which is the top of Montesources. So what I prepared, sorry guys, I'm speaking quite quickly because I realize we don't have a lot of time and some of you guys probably have dinner. This is the kind of thing I create a safety group. I've just blotted out the names of the hams and their numbers and whatever because I didn't get asked them beforehand. But I'll normally have 3 or 4 people that will be part of a safety group. They're going to be in a WhatsApp group. I'll put the details of my family members down because one person might not be contactable. I'll put a colleague down at work because no one ever remembers to tell them when something goes wrong. You can see I've got the MSCA search and rescue. I've got the names of the conveners. If it's a security issue, there's SAP, that's Police and Harry Smith and Pudi Chaba. I create a whole bunch of protocols that everyone knows in advance that I will report my waypoints, what time I get to the waypoints. If there is no cell phone reception, what happens? I have the protocols for radio contacts and literally at what point do you alert MSCA that there's a problem. I'm very, very clear about the protocols we use in terms of the conventions for latitude and longitude, explanations about the physical using bearings, etc., etc. Anyway, I'm not going to go into the detail, and then I normally share a map as well, a paper map. And then on top of that, share your gear list. If you're going to be up on the Heiberg, the mountain club and the rescue guys will want to know whether you are A, have the experience to overnight there, and B, if you've got the bare minimum amount of kit that you're not going to die overnight there. So they will calibrate their response according to what you've got. All right, so when you're activating, there are applications like SOTA Watch where you can spot yourself internationally. I'm still stuck with paper and I've got to get off it because it's just a pain in the ass. There are a lot of really, really great apps where you just literally have to put in your, the call sign of the chaser and press enter and it's there for you. So my sort of execution learnings, planning before the mountain is 90% of the work and it should be. Take the absolute bare minimum, but take everything you need. This is not one of those situations where you can take spare everything. You can't plan for every contingency. So your planning really has to be your buffer. Take pride in navigation, be precise with your timing, because you can really mess your team around. Your chasers are your team, and if you tell them that you're going to be activating at like 9:30 in the morning, and you activate at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, they can really mess with some golf plans and things like that. So take pride in your navigation and planning. Keep your chasers foremost in your thinking. They are your team. Communicate precisely and concisely, but update frequently if you're ahead or behind. Anticipate challenges and plan for alternative scenarios. Leave your ego at home. It won't make you think any better. And be mindful and respectful of chasers, but make your own safety decisions. All right, winning and recognition. All right, this is how you win. The game is ongoing and winning comes from enjoyment of the hobby and personal satisfaction of each contact, right? There is no winner based on points. Winning is from satisfaction. Recognition, most of you guys will know that we have a mountain goat, which comes from 1,000 points for activating, and you have a shack sloth, which is 1,000 points for chasing. And we have two, they're both in the room, right? So we've got two SOTA goats in South Africa, and they are not only SOTA goats, they are way deep in SOTA goat territory. And with all this activity that I've been doing over the last 6 months, not even 20% of the way towards SOTA goat, and that is an unbelievable experience, achievement. And we got four mountain goats. This is meant to be shack sloths. My apologies, guys. And we got 4, and 2 of them are our mountain goats, and the other 2 are this very, very amazing, amazing 2 people, this couple, Christy and Mari, that are sitting right there at the top, and the work they do is amazing, and it's incredibly professional. And all I want to say about these 4 people is that these are not just award winners. What we really have are servant leaders. They are leaders of our SOTA community, and they lead through their actions, and they lead through their ethics, and they lead through their commitment and passion. And I feel very, very privileged to be part of a community that is led by people like this. Right, so apart from those, we've got the Brian Jones Award, and this is award sponsored by Brian for basically the amateurs contributed the most to SOTA every single year, which is fabulous, and that is a floating trophy. And then we've got a proposed bunch of awards, guys, I'm going to shoot through this, but there are a couple of problems with SOTA in some respects, and one of them is that the whole points and peaks, the guys who live close to the coast, they've got really, really tough mountains, but they're 1-pointers, and some people live close to big mountains that you can drive up and they're 10. So this is the an award for the peak proliferator for activating the most peaks every year, the Seeker Sovereign for chasing the most peaks every year. The second one is actually encourages travel to get people out of their home provinces, and it's the 10 region travel. The Nomadic Navigator is for activating at least one peak in each of the 10 SOTA regions. The Regional Responder is for chasing at least one peak in each region. Then we have something that encourages a little bit of technical prowess to make sure that we don't just activate on 14, make the minimum contacts and walk down, and challenges us to make those international contacts. So this is the DX challenge. So the Global GABA is for a minimum of 10 DX contacts for SA activators. The Planet Pinger is for a minimum of 10 DX contacts with offshore activations. And finally, and this relates a little bit to where our sort of got driven, and this is to encourage the adventure side, the mountaineering, challenging yourself on peaks. We have the Vertex Voyager for activating the highest peak in each of the 10 regions, and the Summit Sentinel for chasing the highest peak in each of those regions. So that just adds a little bit of spice that have very, very clear objectives with the the kind of things that we want people to get involved with. So my SOTA dreams. You're looking at it. I'm a mountain climber, I'm a rock climber, and I haven't really yet integrated SOTA with steep verticals. That's in Punj one on the left. In the middle is the peaks around Cathedral, and the right is the Sentinel. And yeah, this is the game plan for when I get going again. And I've said tongue in cheek there, all I need is an antenna that weighs less than a kilogram, perhaps smaller than 30 centimeters, and fits into climbing pack. Requires no mast, no ground system, and will reach chasers in all corners of South Africa. That's all I need. And fortunately, we've got our Q. So for the James Bond fans, you know exactly who Q is. And our Q in this case is Vaughan down in PE, ZS2 Victor Romeo. And Vaughan says he's got it, right? So he's got the specs, and he's going to give me a stripped down version of his magnetic loop. And this thing has got one job and one job only, and that's going to be to get contacts from the tiniest rocky pinnacles where most other antenna systems won't work. So watch the space, whether I achieve those things or not, I don't know, but certainly that's going to be the intention, is to try and lift it to a different level. Sid, as I said, I haven't discussed it with him yet, but Sentinel, Sid, we're going to have a conversation about that. A little bit of rope work involved, but I know you can do it. Right, and that's in conclusion then, with 3 seconds left on my clock. In conclusion, SOTA for me is about challenge and achievement. It's about pushing ourselves, adventure and exploration and travel. I mean, for me, a big thing of SOTA is travel, just going off the beaten track. The whole world is not on the N1, N2, N3, and N4. There's a lot just beyond it. It's connection with nature and pretty much, particularly when it's in solitude. It does encourage physical fitness. I love being on my bicycle after all the SOTA stuff. It does involve technical prowess, and it does involve problem solving, and I guess I've still got a lot to learn there. And it's about community, and I love this community, and I love how it's managed. I mean, Christy manages the WhatsApp group. There's no bullshit there. If you stray off piste, you're going to get deleted. Well, you won't be deleted. Your messages will get deleted first, and if you keep on going, you will be deleted. And I'm very grateful for that. It's about personal growth. It's spiritual for me. Mountains are spiritual, and yeah, thanks for listening. That's my whole story. Keith, I'm sorry I was rushing a bit at the end there, but I was mindful of the clock. I'm gonna end it there and pass back to you.